It's Talk of Iowa from IPR News. I'm Charity Nebbe. Later this hour, school's out for the summer, but Talk of Iowa Summer School is in session. Middle school science teacher Mark Dorhout will teach us how building a birdhouse can give us the opportunity to become a citizen scientist and study nature. But first, according to Mark Twain, the Missouri River is too thick to drink and too thin to plow. The Big Muddy does not get the kind of attention the mighty Mississippi does, but it is the longest river in North America and pivotal in the history of our nation and, of course, our state. When it was time for Lisa Dill's family to replace the old pontoon boat on Lake Okoboji, her cousins suggested taking it on a journey down the Missouri and giving it away at the end. Dill jumped at the opportunity. She wrote about the experience and the river in Around the Bend, Floating Down the Missouri River. Lisa Dill is an adjunct professor of creative and environmental writing at the University of Delaware, and every summer she teaches creative and environmental writing at Iowa Lakeside Laboratory on Lake Okoboji. And she is with me now. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being here. And this is an unlikely story. 5 adults decide that they want to take a 40-year-old pontoon boat down the Missouri River. How did this start?
I don't describe this as unlikely so much as a terrible idea. But we had this old pontoon boat, this very small 1972 pontoon boat, and the family in 2012, when it was 40, said, right, think it's time to buy a new one. And the boat had been purchased by these 4 first cousins of my mother's, and they said to them, what do you want to do with it? And they decided to run it down the Missouri River and give it away. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And everyone else in the family said, they're all going to die.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I mean, and this is kind of a dangerous proposal. I mean, obviously, the boat was old and a lot of people, adult-sized people on a small boat. But the Missouri River itself is famously difficult to navigate.
It is a challenging river. We've got sort of miraculously lucky. It was neither a bad drought year nor was it a flood year. So we had kind of perfect conditions. And it turns out that if you're going to run down the Missouri River from Sioux City to St. Louis, a pontoon boat is actually a pretty good choice, not in a safety way, but in a the draw on a pontoon boat is so low. And once we had actually launched, once we'd gotten, it was berthed for a couple of nights in a little marina in Sioux City on the Big Sioux River. And once we got out into the Missouri, we stopped and one of the cousins got off. And the oldest of the cousins said, right, from now on out, no more than 4 people on the boat at once or it will sink. So...
All right, and so I mean, you did have a vehicle traveling along the route as well, so you had support, right, and escape from the river if you needed it. So
yes,
you mentioned these are cousins of your mother's.
My mother's.
So how close were you to this part of the family before you took on the journey?
Well, I am, as we speak, at Lake Okoboji, and I'm actually not at Lakeside Lab at this moment. I've come over to my family's cottage, which is 111 years old. And the cottage has always been the kind of gathering place for my family because those cousins, by the time I was born, all lived in the Seattle area, and I grew up on the East Coast, and my mother has 3 sisters. There are 4 of those cousins, so we would all come together here at Okoboji. And I knew them, of course. I'm the second child of my generation and the daughter of their oldest cousin. But I didn't know them in a let's live together on a boat for a couple of weeks sort of way. And I think they would say the same, that they knew me, sort of. But, luckily, they were delightful and very, very welcoming. And I learned a ton of stuff about my family that I had never known. I heard all kinds of stories and all sorts of, like, my grandfather who died when I was 7, they told me a lot about him. So it was really, it was delightful.
So a lot of planning and preparation went into this journey. Although, I mean, it was kind of a nutty idea and the five of you decided to do it. One of your cousins,
Yeah.
or maybe more than one, I mean, really did serious research about understanding the river and understanding how to navigate the river. So this is not you guys, grabbed a couple of
Yeah.
beers and hopped on the boat and took off, right?
No, we didn't. We had full, like they went over to the library in Milford and used their color printer and printed off. I think it was like 170 pages of full color river charts from the Corps of Engineers, which hilariously were dated 2011, and we were on the river in 2013. And all of the charts said, "Be advised, river may have moved slightly since these." So, like, everything on the charts was only maybe where they said it was going to be.
Approximately this. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
vaguely there. And, obviously it's not going to include things like trees that have blown into the river and whatever debris might be floating about. But really, we had extraordinary good luck, not unlike the Corps of Discovery. We were very, very fortunate. We only once had a bad encounter with a floating log that we had seen, and fortunately for us, the best boater of the bunch was steering at the time, so got us through it without sinking. And we knew where we were going to spend every night, and the rest of the day it was just sort of getting ourselves there and paying attention to the rules of going down a river on a boat. You have to change lanes because of dredge traffic and whatnot. But most of the time, we didn't see almost anybody, apart from outside the bigger marinas. So we just kind of puttered along and looked ridiculous and waved to the people on the banks who mostly just stared at us with their mouths open.
I'm sure they had a lot of questions. And this took you about 2 weeks? Am I right about that?
Yeah, you are. I got off in Jefferson City because I had sort of given myself a timeline, and I had a house and bills and pets and whatnot that I needed to get home to on the East Coast, and it's even from Iowa City, which is where I left my car, it's a solid 2-day drive. So I got off about 2.5 days before they got to St. Louis, but they did get to St. Louis and they sailed it across the Mississippi to Illinois, and they brought it back and gave it away to a nice band that we'd met actually while I was getting off the boat for the last time.
Well, you mentioned the Corps of Discovery, and
yes,
the Missouri River obviously has played an incredibly pivotal role in the history of our nation. And the Corps of Discovery is not the beginning of that because, of course, people lived on this land and had a relationship with the river for thousands of years before Lewis and Clark set out on this journey. But let's start with the Corps of Discovery and just remind us of how important the Missouri was in really allowing these agents of the U.S. government to reach into the interior.
Yeah, the Lewis and Clark were not the first Europeans to sail up the Missouri River. They were the first to sail up all the way to the headwaters. But a Scotsman and a Welshman had gone up as far as the Mandan Villages, which is actually where the Corps of Discovery spent that first winter, which is in North Dakota. They had sailed up it a few years earlier, and so Lewis and Clark had their maps and their notes and all of the information they had to bear about, the people who were living there and what to expect and what to pay attention to, and a sort of idea of what the river would be like. They were a little bit optimistic initially about how many men they would need in order to get everything going. When they first brought together the original Corps, they tested out the boat that Lewis had built in Pittsburgh on the Mississippi, actually, from Fort Caskey in Illinois, and they tried to sail it upstream and thought, great, we're going to need a whole lot more guys, and hired about 20 more men. And most of the way upstream, They pulled it on ropes. They walked in the water and just pulled the boat loaded with supplies and gifts and various things, and they just walked it up the river because getting up, I went downstream.
Right.
Upstream is a whole different conversation. But, the point was, of course, to go out and see what the interior of the country looked like, and who's here and what kind of wildlife is here. My favorite bit of the Corps of Discovery story from the first year is that someplace probably across the river from Sioux City-ish, the guys spent an entire day trying to capture a prairie dog. And ultimately, this is 35 trained woodsmen, and they finally gave up and just filled its den with water so it came sputtering out. They put it in a cage. They carried it with them to the Mandan villages. They kept it alive over the winter, along with a magpie. And in April, when the river started to thaw, they sent the magpie and the prairie dog alive back to St. Louis, and they then traveled, I'm assuming by boat, but all the way back to Washington and were presented to Thomas Jefferson in the White House.
And they were still living
alive
and lived in the White House, right?
Yeah. I don't quite know what happened to them after they got to the White House, but I love to imagine that they were just sort of flitting about, But the part of that I think is really great is not even so much that they, were alive in the White House. It's that those guys living in North Dakota in a native community for an entire Northern Plains winter kept them alive, fed them from their own food,
right.
Melted snow, presumably, so that they could drink water. That's commitment.
It is. Lisa, we have to take a short break. We're speaking of commitment. We'll be back in just a moment. I am talking with Lisa Dill. She is the author of Around the Bend, Floating Down the Missouri River. She also teaches environmental writing at Iowa Lakeside Laboratory on Lake Okoboji every summer. More in a moment. This is Talk of Iowa from IPR News. It's Talk of Iowa from IPR News. I'm Charity Nebbe. Coming up in 20 minutes, Talk of Iowa Summer School is in session. I will talk with middle school science teacher Mark Dorhout. He's going to teach us how building a birdhouse can give us the opportunity to become citizen scientists and study nature. Right now, I am talking with Lisa Dill. In 2013, she and 4 of her cousins decided to take the family's 40-year-old pontoon boat down the Missouri River from Sioux City to St. Louis. She wrote a book about the experience and about the river. It's called Around the Bend, Floating Down the Missouri River. She's an adjunct professor of creative and environmental writing at the University of Delaware. And every summer, she teaches creative and environmental writing at Iowa Lakeside Laboratory on Lake Okoboji. And Lisa, of course, the Mississippi River gets all the press. It's a river that is so storied in so many ways, but it also became such an incredible highway. It drove so much progress and commerce in this country in the early years. And people wanted that for the Missouri River as well. And the Missouri has been and really continues to be so hard to tame. Tell me a little bit about what makes the Missouri what it is as an ecosystem and why it's so difficult to tame.
It's one of the things that I love most about that river is its sort of refusal to play by our rules, despite all of the things that we have done to it, many of which are necessary if we're going to live alongside a river like that. I think one of the first important things to think about, as if you're sort of putting the two of them side by side, is that the Missouri, of course, doesn't drain into an ocean. It drains into another river. So there is much less space for excessive water in a flood year to go. But the other thing that's important or different about the Missouri is that for most of its run, it's incredibly shallow, and it's deeper now in the bit that I traveled, because that bit does have a shipping channel to the extent, right? The only people who are really using it are dredges and barges, but it's at best about 15 feet deep from Sioux City to St. Louis. And prior to that, it was, in places it was 2 or 3 feet deep. The steamboat captains of old, they tried really hard to make the Missouri, kind of a steamboat moving settlers up into the northwest part of the continent. And there used to be a regular steamboat run that went all the way to Montana, obviously before the dams went in. But it was incredibly dangerous. I don't remember the number. I should have looked it up, but something like 70 of them sank. They would get stuck on dead trees or sandbars they couldn't see, or, all manner of things. I want to say that this was Mark Twain, but it might have been somebody else. Somebody in a quote talking about going up the Missouri River said it was more crawling than sailing, because the men of the steamboat would have to get out and pull the steamboat off of various obstacles whenever they encountered them, and that often would take up to a day, tacked onto a how many months long journey it would take you to get, say, to Sioux City upstream in the Missouri in a steamboat in 1870 something.
Wow. Well, and I mean, while we're talking about steamboats, you share a statistic that I just found to be flooring. So the first steamboat wreck on the Missouri was in 1819. Between 1819 and 1900, 300 steamboats were destroyed by the river, and most of those boats only lasted 4 years.
Yeah, I really lowballed that with my 70, didn't I? Yeah. It had a horrendous survival. And, steamboats were incredibly dangerous. Like a lot of the past, we've kind of romanticized them as this delightful thing that happened, and all of a sudden travel was super quick and efficient. But, Mark Twain lost his own brother, who he got when Twain was learning how to be a riverboat pilot. He got his brother hired as an engine room worker, and the boiler exploded and his brother was killed. They were incredibly dangerous. They caught on fire. They ran into things. They sank. The Arabia, which I talk about quite a bit in the book, sank in, I'm not going to remember the year, but it sank. It hit a snag tree, poked a hole right through the hull, sank in about 30 minutes. They got every person off the boat safely. The only loss of life was a mule. And the boat sank completely into the mud. I want to say it was 1846.
1856.
But I may be wrong on that.
Yep.
56. And it just vanished. And then, 100 years, 150 years later, 140 years later, this group of businessmen from Kansas City decided to go find it, and it was 45 feet beneath a cornfield. And because that was when the river wasn't engineered, because the Army Corps of Engineers spent so much time between 1890 and 1940, or 50 rather, sort of straightening out the river and trying to make it behave with varying levels of success. It was a mile from where the river is today when they found it. Like, wow. It was a mile from the river. That's how much the river has moved.
That's so extraordinary. And you think about that mud. It's just...
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
That makes me think about, the people moving those steamboats up the river, the Corps of Discovery with the men walking in the river. Yep. I can only imagine how difficult that was to pull their boots out of the mud. And, Lisa, when you look at the Missouri, I've spent many hours of my life looking at the Missouri River. And most of the time when you look, it looks sluggish. I mean, it is wide. Mm-hmm. It's opaque. It doesn't look like a river that could destroy 300 steamboats in the space of 80 years.
Yeah, but it can. I mean, one of the kind of driving motivations for me to write this book at all is the fact that for a lot of really understandable reasons, it is incredibly difficult to get close to a river in this country, like a big river in this country, and rightly so, right? They're profoundly unsafe. But the Mississippi River is hard to get to. The Delaware River by me is hard to get to. The Hudson River is hard to get to, right? We don't, unless we are actively trying to, we don't have to encounter rivers in our sort of day-to-day life. We drive over them. We drive alongside them, but we don't get close to them. And that makes it easy, weirdly, for them to sort of become static in our minds as part of a landscape, but not as a moving system, right? And I really wanted readers, not to finish this book and think, what I need to do is get a 40-year-old pontoon boat and go down the Missouri River, but to sort of look out the window at whatever their river is. Of the 150 biggest cities in this country, something like 130 of them are built on the side of rivers. Look out at their river and wonder, what's it doing? Where is it coming from? Where does it rise? What have they done to contain it? What have they done to manage it? How is it doing? Is it healthy? Is it, for lack of a better term, happy, right?
Yeah.
Is it free? Is it not free? What's it doing? So I'm just hoping that people will take a little bit of interest in rivers because they're incredibly important. And as we know right now, the Colorado River is in dire straits in terms of drought levels and water supply. And, all of these issues are relevant for all of us.
I'm talking with Lisa Dill. She's the author of Around the Bend, Floating Down the Missouri River. And Lisa, speaking of drought, with the Missouri River, drought obviously is a huge challenge and can be very serious. Drought in Iowa is something that we all dread. But the Missouri in flood stage is incredibly powerful. And, those of us who remember 1993, the Missouri was so far outside its banks. It was so high. It did so much damage. And of course, we've had more recent floods that also remind us of the power of this river. What do you think we need to understand about flooding on the Missouri?
There is a sequence of photographs that I took that I wish I could have put into the book, but there were too many of them, and they would have had to been really too big in order for them to really make any kind of context. We spent a night at the St. Joseph's Boat and Yacht Club in St. Joseph, Missouri. And the boat, so we put the boat on, obviously, their floating dock in the river. And the bank up to the level ground where the yacht club is, I don't know. I'm not very good, I'm sorry, at sort of spatial distance. 30, 40 yards high. I don't know. High bank, very, very high bank. And then from the top of the bank to the boathouse was probably 60 or 70 yards, right? So quite a bit of water, or quite a bit of land up to the flat land, quite a bit of territory over to this boat club. The levee was just beyond that. The levee was on the other side of their parking lot. Up on their wall, and the boat and yacht club building itself is on stilts because of the floods of '93. And up on the wall, there was a little sign that was probably another 20 or 30 feet up in the air that said water level 1993.
Wow.
I stood there and, of course, I was here at Okoboji in 1993 when all of that was happening. I wasn't paying any attention to the Missouri River at the time, but, I knew about that system. But standing underneath this sign, looking up at it and just thinking about the tonnage of water from way down there in the river, that it's almost impossible to explain. And I'm not an engineer or a river biologist, so I don't have any good answers for how we do better with this. But it's an incredibly dangerous river. And again, I think a lot of that is because it doesn't have the Delaware River by my house isn't even a river. It's an estuary up to Trenton, New Jersey. The ocean is 75 miles away from me. So the possibility of that amount of water is almost unconceivable.
Yeah.
Right. The river's just too big there. But the Missouri's got nowhere to go because it's an inland river.
We did learn a lot from 1993. And of course, I mean,
Yes.
Hamburg, the town basically was washed away in 2019. So, I mean, these catastrophic floods on the Missouri have continued to happen, will continue to happen. But we did change some policies, and there have been efforts to restore some wetlands around the Missouri, which do protect, human settlements and civilizations. When you were floating down the Missouri, were you able to see that? Were there areas that you went through that you thought maybe this is what the Missouri looked like before humans started intervening?
Yes. There is a big stretch of the river, and I want to say it's in Missouri, that has been reclaimed as a sort of wetland complex. And it doesn't look enormously different from the rest of, the Missouri is fairly remote most of the way. I mean, it runs through, these big cities, but it's most of the time you're just kind of out there. And the river, it's got trees and it's got marshy things. There's a long layer of, or a long stretch of preserved area that is specifically to absorb floodwaters in Missouri. There's also, and you can go visit it because I did a couple of years ago. I took my creative writing class and we tagged along with the aquatic ecology class out here at Lakeside Lab and went to a set of wetlands that were fields that farmers had donated back to the state, that the state was allowing in the floodplain of the Missouri, that the state was allowing to revert into wetlands. And they were amazing. And you can just drive out there and have a look at them. They're just muddy and they're not super pretty, but they're full of life. There's frogs and birds and bugs and, all kinds of wetland plants. And, I think it's incredibly important. And my enormous thanks and support to the people who are making that sort of thing happen, because if we give that water someplace to go, not only will it do less damage, obviously, but it will also retain some of that, right, in the soil so that it's available to Iowa and the other states.
You spent 2 weeks on the river, but then you spent many years studying the river and
Yes.
writing this book. So beyond even that 2 weeks, which was a pivotal experience for you, what do you take away from this deep relationship that you've built with the Missouri?
Well, I'm happy to say that I went and visited it for the first time this summer last weekend, and had a little conversation with it about how I'd finally gotten the book published, and I hope that I did it well enough to make the river happy. I say to my students about writing projects, and I'm not talking about 10-year long writing projects, I'm talking about little short ones. You from my experience, I have to fall in love with my subject if I'm going to write well about it. It's not even about sticking with it. It's just about writing well. And, famously Twain said that the longer he learned to be a riverboat pilot, the less he enjoyed looking at the Mississippi, because he knew too much about it. He understood it too well. So he just wasn't getting it. And I have kind of the opposite experience. Obviously I did not have to learn the Missouri River in the same ways that Twain did, in a sort of inch by inch, that tree means we're at this place and that means there's a sandbar up there. But I did have to learn an awful lot of, science and engineering and history and all kinds of things that I didn't anticipate. And the more of those stories I I absorbed, the more I felt connected to. My family, my mother's family, comes from Sioux County, Iowa, and the more that I got to know the river in all of its, or at least the bits of it that I chose to focus on, and the people who live on it or near it, or have lived on it or near it, the more I felt connected to it, the more I recognized its importance.
Lisa, we have run out of time, but thank you so much. The book is Around the Bend, Floating Down the Missouri River. It's Talk of Iowa from IPR News. I'm Charity Nebbe. School is out for the summer, but Talk of Iowa Summer School is in session. This summer, teachers from across the state will be sharing a favorite lesson with us for students of all ages. We're going to start today with Mark Dorhout. He is a middle school science teacher at Panorama Secondary School, and he's going to teach us how to build a birdhouse and become citizen scientists. Hello, Mark.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for being here, for coming back to the show. And Mark, this is part of your outdoor education program. Tell me where you got the idea for this lesson.
Well, this lesson is a long time coming. It actually started back when I was a high schooler some 40 years ago. I was in the traditional shop classes, and one of the requirements that I had was to mass produce something. And I had always been an outdoorsman, an avid duck hunter, and I started building or mass producing about 15 wood duck boxes, and then gave them away to people to put up, and then I also maintained those. And I always thought that gave you a certain connection to the land, and it was an immediate response to improving habitat or a space for some wild animals. And so when I started teaching again, I was a science teacher, and then I was a middle school principal for 20 years, and now I'm back in the classroom for the last 5. Decided to reincorporate this in a kind of a bigger scale with all of my 7th graders. So we are actively building bluebird and wren houses.
Nice. So you're not on the water. You're not building wood duck houses. But this isn't just about the birds entirely. That act of building something with your hands that then becomes part of creating habitat for an animal. What do you think that physical process does for the kids?
Well, from my perspective, I've always been a builder. I've been laying carpet since I was in 6th grade and always kind of around the trades. And there is something special when you start building something and realizing that, yes, the structures that we live in, these things, we can understand how they are put together, and we can actually do it. It's not something that is off in la-la land. It's something that we can actually do. So I collaborate with the shop teacher that we have, the industrial tech teacher, Mr. Osbar, on this project, and it's kind of a high school and middle school thing. He teaches them a bunch of skills in their middle school exploratory classes, and then I just follow up with that, and I do kind of a mass production process and teach them the efficiencies of doing small pieces of a project, one thing at a time, and doing it very well to give them that sense of, oh, we can do this, and not only can we do it, but we can do high-quality work. And I just think that it's important for kids to realize that a power driver and a drill, everybody's got them around, they're achievable, and we can build some pretty cool stuff if we pay attention to what we want.
Yeah, it's a really empowering experience, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And it's not, it used to be, yes, my shop classes were full of boys, but anymore, I would say that some of my best builders have been girls, and I think definitely that tide has turned and has allowed everybody to see that we're all mechanically inclined in some form or fashion. We just have to get out there and start doing it.
So once your students have built their birdhouses, where do they put them?
So it's specifically for my seventh graders. We have about 50 kids per grade, so every year we mass produce 50 bluebird and wren houses, and then we go through a process where I give them the birdhouse, and it is theirs for their own property wherever they want to put it. We talk about the differences between the biology between a wren and a bluebird, and they get to select which type they get, and then from there they put it where they want to. Usually it's at their own premises. I try to encourage them to keep it relatively close to them because one of the things that I want to do is have them be observing it, not just every other week like they're required to do, but also on a daily basis multiple times when it's something that's sitting out your back door and you realize that you've got a little eastern bluebird that's interested in it. All of a sudden you're just paying attention all the time. And so they get it, and it's theirs to keep forever. So I've got, in fact, all of the kids at Panorama Secondary School now with this upcoming senior class, everybody will have built and have been given one of these houses.
Wow. So when they mount this birdhouse, I mean, you do have an assignment. You just mentioned observing the nest box every 1 to 2 weeks. What is the assignment for the students once this birdhouse is placed, hopefully in an appropriate space?
So we talk about those appropriate spaces. Once they get them up, usually there's about a month of downtime there where we've got a little bit of biology difference because typically the eastern bluebirds come back well before the wrens do. And so I kind of just lay them out there and they get to observe and see what's happening. It's also when their interest is peaked. So I have to kind of just lead on the house wren people because they don't see any action for a little while and they're kind of about it.
Yeah.
But we just keep them hungry about that. We talk about other different birds and their nesting types. And then from there, once they start observing every 1 to 2 weeks, they've got a form that they're supposed to put on the fridge that they fill out just one line of it every 1 to 2 weeks, and it talks about the different things, the day of the observation, the number of eggs that they've found, are there any living young, are there any dead young, the nest status, the adult status, any predators or anything like that, and then it's just a biweekly evaluation for about 8 weeks then from the end of March, April right in there until the end of June, where they're just assessing whether or not birds are in it and what's actually happening in those nests.
What kind of response have you seen from your students from having this opportunity? Because I can imagine that many of them have never observed a nest before of any kind of bird, have never seen those little birds and watched, adults come and care for them. What kinds of observations do they share?
Well, first off, if you've never seen a seventh grader get excited, you get them a birdhouse and then have some wrens start using it or an eastern bluebird pair fly into it for the first time, because without fail, I always it's my custom right when the bell rings, I make sure that I'm at the main door and I see a bunch of kids come in. And once these birdhouses go up, there's not a day that somebody isn't coming in and saying, "Hey, Mr. Dorhout, guess what?" And they start getting excited about what's happening and what they've seen. And then when they start opening them up and they start evaluating what kind of a nest it is, and based on the type of materials in the nest box, and they start seeing different birds, they're just super excited about it. And while yes, there are some kids that are about it, most of the kids are pretty excited about it.
And as they make those observations, okay, they get really jazzed about it. But what do you think they learn from watching the process as those eggs are laid and the baby birds hatch?
Well, it's not so much I've been thinking about long term. It's not so much about that one specific thing. It is the spark that gets them attentive to things. But the reality is, it gets them attentive to nature. And when that starts, I feel like I'm opening up a whole new world to them, because the reality is kids, less and less of their time is spent outdoors with video games and cell phones. And it's one of those things that I don't like. I don't think it's healthy. And I think a lot of kids are starting to lose that understanding of nature. And so it's that counter programming that I create that allows them to realize, oh, there's some cool stuff happening here. And this is just one small part of my whole big outdoor ed program. And that's a 3-year process where I've got kids out in field trips about 60 times over the course of the 3 years that I have them in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So they spend quite a little time outdoors, and definitely they like that aspect of my courses.
So what you just described for young people in today's culture, being more disconnected from nature, also goes for a whole lot of adults. So knowing that you're talking to students of all ages right now, some people probably can figure out a way to build their own birdhouse. I mean, what is your advice for somebody for making this happen in their own yard?
I'll tell you what. If there was a magic wand in my hand and I could wave it to increase people's capacity to enjoy the outdoors, the number one thing I would do is encourage everybody to download an app on their cell phone. And I know it sounds silly, but Merlin Bird ID is a free app that Cornell University put together that is a fantastic way to start learning about the outdoors via birds. It's an app that listens outside, and it teaches you bird sounds. It teaches you about what birds look like. You can develop a life list of birds on it, and it's simple. It's free to use. They do every once in a while, they ask for donations, but that's not very often. And the platform is super stable, and you can go back to it over and over again, and you can save your recordings. And man, it has been transformative for my kids as well, because of the 140 kids, I probably have over 80 of them that routinely use Merlin Bird ID. And that's a 5 minutes, go outside, sit for 5 minutes, record and watch and learn. And all of a sudden that 5 minutes becomes 10 minutes, or 10 becomes 20. And so for all the adults out there, it gets you outside, it gets you in the breeze a little bit, and starts slowing down your brain, and then it starts reconnecting you with nature. And I think it's been like one of the best tools out there.
In a way, it kind of decodes nature for people, I feel. I love the Merlin app as well. And I think that some people are so intimidated. They think, how can I possibly learn to identify birds, or how can I understand what's going on out there? They go outside, they don't even know what they're supposed to be doing. And it feels like the Merlin app is almost like a translator.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what is your favorite feature of it?
I just love to see, to record and then see what's around me at any given time. And it's also, we have these flocks that come through that land in the trees at our house, and they, you can see all the murmurations, and I'll think I know what kind of bird it is, but then Merlin helps me. Absolutely. I do know what kind of bird this is.
And that is another thing that in the class and in this program specifically, we have to talk about some of the rough stuff, because, we're putting up eastern bluebird houses because of those murmuration birds that you're talking about, those European starlings that came in and decimated native cavity nesting species. And it's unfortunate that they did that. And the reality is, if we provide these boxes, I guarantee you're going to start seeing more and more bluebirds. I know around my house, I've got six birdhouses right around my house. I continue to see more and more eastern bluebirds all the time. But even throughout the community at our prairie, where we have we've got over 20 boxes on the school prairie itself, continue to see way more and more eastern bluebirds as a result. So,
You're making a real difference. Yeah.
Yes. And that is ultimately one of the things that my kids take away, that we build it, they will come. And guess what? It improves their species. And especially for eastern bluebirds, they're kind of a timid, quiet, silent type. They're not in your face, but they're kind of off on the back. And the reality is, you kind of don't pay attention to them, and then you start seeing these little flashes of blue everywhere, and you realize, gosh, they're just getting by, and they like people. They don't shy away from people because they love short grass to feed in. So actually, it's one of the few things that I find Kentucky bluegrass is good for, because I'm not a fan of lawns, but they do feed bluebirds really well. So
I know a lot of people put up bird feeders, but bird houses, I don't think, are as common as bird feeders. Do you encourage people to do this? I mean, it really does create habitat and support for some of those species that are more rare.
Absolutely. And yes, while a feeder, I feed in the winter and water all year round, but then I get rid of my feeders, except for my hummingbird feeders, in the summer. And I enjoy the houses. And like I said, I've got 6 right around my house. I've got one right by my mailbox, right by the front of our street, just to have other people kind of pay attention to the fact that, yeah, you can put up birdhouses and they can be just right out there. And if you're paying attention to it, life is happening all around us, and it's just kind of a cool thing to provide.
We started the hour talking about the Missouri River, Mark, and I heard that you were out fishing on the Missouri just this past weekend. Oh,
yeah. I've got a long connection with the Missouri River, actually. I graduated from South Dakota State in Brookings, but 35 years ago, I spent a summer on the Missouri River looking at the endangered species, least tern and piping plover, that nest on the sandbars of the Missouri, and did that for 4 months. And then I've got a fishing trip that for the last 31 years, the majority of those years, we spent on the Missouri River fishing. And it's a really important part of my life.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I hope you inspired a lot of us, no matter whether or not we invest in a birdhouse or not, to go outside and spend some time looking around. Mark Dorhout, thank you so much.
You are more than welcome.
Mark Dorhout is a middle school science teacher at Panorama Secondary School, and we are launching our Talk of Iowa Summer School. If you're a teacher with a lesson you'd like to share, email us at talkofiowa@iowapublicradio.org. This is Talk of Iowa.